A new study finds that marijuana users have more sex. Hi, this is Dr. Jana, and this is a Sex Science News update. So, marijuana use is becoming a lot more commonplace in the United States. Over the past 2 decades, 29 states have legalized its use for either recreational or medical purposes. And some of the latest estimates suggest that there might be 22 million current users of pot. A new study using a nationally representative sample of over 50,000 US residents, ages 15 to 44, finds that all this pot smoking might not be so bad about people's sex lives. In fact, it finds that the people who are reporting regular marijuana use are also reporting more sex or more frequent sexual intercourse. So specifically, they asked people how often they were having sex over the last month, over the last 4 weeks, and they also asked people how often they were using marijuana during the past year. And they found that people who are using pot on a daily, monthly, or weekly basis were all likely to have more sex, to report sex more frequently in the past 4 weeks compared to the people who had never used pot in their lives. And I'll give you some examples. For example, women who said they had never used pot in their lives, So, for example, women who reported no marijuana use in the past 12 months had sexual intercourse 6 times on average during the last month. Compare that to 7.1 times on average for the women who were using marijuana on a daily basis. For men, these numbers were 5.6 for the never smoked pot to 6.9 or almost 7 times on average for the men who were doing it on a daily basis. And this was something that this difference between in the sexual frequency between marijuana users and non-users was something that held across 3 separate cycles, 3 separate data waves, collection waves of this National Survey of Family Growth study, which surveys a nationally representative sample of Americans ages 15 to 44, and they've done that in 2006, then again, in 2002, then again in 2006 to 2010, and then again between the 2011 and 2015 time period. So across all these 3 cycles of data collection, the marijuana users had sex more often than the non-users. And also, these differences held after the researchers controlled for a whole host of demographic and health characteristics. So even after statistically controlling for things like age, marital status, ethnicity, children in the home, religion, poverty status, education level, body mass index, general reported health, pregnancy status. So you put all of those things and in the model, and the marijuana users were still having more sex than the non-users. And then some follow-up analyses that kind of broke down the entire sample into these different demographic groups found that across all of the demographic groups, this was also the case. So men and women showed this increase among marijuana users of sexual frequency, as did women. It was true of whites and non-whites, of younger and older people, of married and unmarried people, of those with and without children, of those who were pregnant, those who weren't pregnant, of those who were more educated versus less educated, of those who had higher body mass index versus lower body mass index, right? All of these subgroups showed a similar pattern where those who were smoking pot were reporting more frequent sex than those who weren't smoking pot. So this is really interesting and certainly good news for those who like to get high every now and then. However, I want to point out that there are a few caveats here that people very often don't think about, and many of you are probably going to interpret this as meaning, well, hell, marijuana use makes you have more sex. We cannot, based on these data, determine that this is a causal relationship, that marijuana use causes people to have more sex. It's very tempting to read it that way, but what this study did is just survey people at one point in time and found that these people who are smoking pot are also having more sex. But we don't know what causes what. It is possible, it is very possible that it is marijuana use causing people to have more sex. There's some other studies in the past among marijuana users who where people have been asked about the effects they subjectively have experienced when smoking pot. And across 3 or 4 different studies, a review of 3 or 4 different studies found that about 50% of people who smoke pot say that it increases or improves their sexual arousal, and about 75% say that it increases their sexual pleasure. So to whatever extent, right, you have these subjective experiences of better sex and higher arousal, you might also be driven to have more sex because of that, right? However, and also there's some interesting research with animals finding that if you inject rats who are not having sex, who have never had sex before, if you inject them with a cannabinoid, a certain type of cannabinoid that is found in rats, then you can get these sexually inactive rats to start having sex. About 50% in one study of the rats that were injected with this cannabinoid started having sex, compared to none, almost none among those who were injected with a placebo effect. So it is very possible that pot actually makes people have more sex. However, it is also very possible, I would say equally plausible, if not more plausible, that what's going on is that the people who are likely to use pot are people who are just higher on sensation seeking, risk taking, right? They have this more adventure kind of seeking personality. And those are the same people who are also more likely to have more sex or want more sex and then actually go and get it. So the increased frequency of sex with increased marijuana use might be, they both might be a product of this general tendency among these people to seek new experiences or pleasurable experience, rewarding experiences, right? So it might not be a causal relationship. I also want to point out another caveat or another limitation of this particular study. They only asked the way the question was asked, they asked about sexual intercourse with a person of the opposite sex. So we don't know whether these findings extend to same-sex experiences because they were not captured in any way or shape or form in this study. Weird. Like, really? People are only having sex with other sex partners? But anyway, and they also obviously did not ask about non-intercourse behavior. So we don't know, maybe the people who are not smoking pot are having more oral sex or genital touching or other forms potentially of sexual interactions with partners. So that's a caveat. And also I do want to point out that while these differences in sexual frequency between the marijuana users and the non-users were statistically significant and they were pretty robust, they held across the different demographic groups, and even after controlling for all of those demographic factors, the absolute size of that difference is not like staggering. It's not like the non-smokers, the non-pot users were having sex like twice a month and the pot users were having sex 20 times a month. The difference was somewhere between like 1 to 1.5 times more on average per month. So 1 to 1.5 extra sex sessions that the pot users were getting over the people who were not using pot. So there you have it. Pot users are having more sex on average, at least in the US, than non-pot users. That may or may not be a causal link, but it certainly is good to know that all of this increase in pot use is not at least hindering people's ability to have some fun in the bedroom. And it has increased quite a bit. There was a Gallup poll that recently found that the number of people who say that they use pot, like they are current users, has almost doubled in only 3 years. It was 7% of people saying that they were current users of marijuana in 2013, and then went up to 13% in 2016. And you can imagine that as more and more states legalize marijuana and it becomes more socially acceptable, that this is going to increase even more. So it's really good to know that it's not hindering sexual experiences. Now, another caveat I forgot to mention is that we have no idea whether pot increase or decrease the sexual pleasure or functioning in the context of the sexual experience, only that it was related to more sex on average. All right, there you go. That's your sex science news update for today. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.